How's it going, friends? Slovakia just held a national election. Now, if you believe the mainstream media, the winner of the election was Russian disinformation. And a pro-Russia strongman has won the election, and European democracy is under threat. Now, Slovakia had a really comical amount of parties. According to polls, 9 or 10 were predicted to make the 5% threshold and win seats. Well, only 7 did. 17% of all voters voted for a party that didn't win any seats. Now, the three main parties are all three socialist parties. In America, and pretty much the rest of the Anglosphere, we think of center-right economic policies as being married to conservatism. And that if you're conservative on social issues, you also have to have a traditional center-right economic plan. But a lot of the world is not like that. And in Slovakia, the population is very socially and culturally conservative, but they're also very economically socialist. Now, this is Smer, the Slovak Social Democrats. They've been one of the main parties for years and years. The leader is Robert Fico, who's a former prime minister. They ran a very nationalistic, socially conservative campaign. They made opposition to immigration a big issue. They made opposition to gay marriage a big issue. But the thing that made the media come unhinged is Fico says he's going to completely halt the transfer of weapons from Slovakia to Ukraine, and he will never allow Ukraine to become a member of NATO. So that's what's got them really unhinged, and they're calling him, a big threat to their globalist plans. They're already predicting a two-party nationalist bloc between Hungary and Slovakia that's going to be a big thorn in the side of the EU globalists now. So moving along, you've got Halas, which means voice. And they're a splinter group of Smer that was launched in 2020. And best I can tell, most of the difference is personality. There's people in the parties that don't like each other, but ideologically they're very similar. In fact, Halas also campaigned against non-European immigration and against gay marriage in this election. This party, however, is the Progressive Social Democrats. They are more of a leftist party like the Social Democrats you see in Germany and a lot of Scandinavian countries. Now, they're not as radical as, say, the Swedish Social Democrats, because Slovakia is still a very conservative country, but they're going in that direction. So this was basically the leftist socialists. And then I've been seeing a lot of phrases thrown around for Smer like left conservative, left populist, left-wing nationalist, things like that. Now, besides the three socialist parties, you've got Ordinary People, Christian Democrats, and Freedom and Solidarity. These are more or less more establishment center-right parties in the way that an American would think of a center-right party. Ordinary People is probably more big tent centrist. Freedom and Solidarity is a little bit more libertarian. Then you've got the Slovak National Party, which is more of a strictly nationalist party. Smer has a history of coalitioning with the Slovak National Party. In fact, Smer was expelled from the alliance of European socialist parties at one time for coalitioning with this party. I think they've been let back in. Now, this is not the same alliance as the EU party grouping. There was another really hardcore nationalist party called Republika that was polling 6%, but they ended up getting less than 5%, so they didn't make the threshold. The Hungarian party won first place in 3 districts, the ones with the most Magyars. but they fell below the 5%. The party called We Are Family, which is part of Matteo Salvini's alliance in the EU Parliament, they only got 2.5%, so they did terrible. Now, the media was desperately hoping that the progressives would come in first place, and then they would have first shot at forming a coalition, and they were predicting a coalition between the progressives, Hollis, and the Christian Democrats. And even after the polls closed, there was one exit poll that showed the progressives in first place with 23%. And this was the exit poll that all the media was using, and they were all celebrating and thinking that the progressives had beat Schmer. Truth had defeated Russian disinformation. Well, they didn't do nearly as well as these exit polls were showing. They got 18%, and Schmer was the one that got 23%. So today, Robert Fico had the obligatory meeting with the Slovak president to get the mandate to form a coalition. Now, the Slovak president is a member of the Progressive Party, and she put a 14-day stipulation on it, which is unusual. But I guess it's within her framework of powers. A lot of times in Europe, these coalitions can take months to form. Well, the president's trying to put the squeeze on them and only give them 14 days in hopes that they can't pull it off. But most likely, Schmer, Hlas, and the Slovak National Party will form a coalition. Now, I've made videos in the past where I talked about how the EPP, the Christian Democrat group in the European Union Parliament, expelled Fidesz. And so now there's talk, the Prime Minister of Sweden, who's part of the Swedish Social Democrats, he's saying that, well, we may have to expel Schmer from the S&D, the Progressive Alliance of Socialists and Democrats. Well, I think this would be a great thing because this is going to throw Schmer into the orbit of parties like Fidesz and the French National Rally and Italian Lega, and it will contribute to a greater nationalist bloc in the European Union. The best case scenario would be that the S&D expels Schmer, and then the EPP starts agitating for them to expel more parties. Hey, the Bulgarian Socialist Party is just as bad. They're pro-Putin too. Kick them out. And then the S&D starts agitating against the EPP saying, hey, you got more parties that are just as bad as Fidesz. Kick them out. And then these two groups start destroying themselves in a fit of virtue signaling and cast out more parties that go into the orbit of the parties like National Rally and Fidesz and whatnot. Now, Matteo Salvini's EU grouping, Identity and Democracy, ID, you've got parties like Alternative for Germany and Austrian Freedom Party. They advocate what Americans would think of as a classic center-right economic policy. But then you've got like Lega and Vlaams Belang, some other parties that are more like Big Tent populist. And then you've got Marine Le Pen and National Rally, which is accused by some conservatives of being too socialist. Schmer is actually a lot more like National Rally in France than it is with most of its social democrat allies in the European Parliament at this point. All right, I'm losing my voice, so I'm going to have to call it quits. Thanks for watching this video. Click the like button, post a comment below, tell me what you think about all this, and please support me on Subscribestar and subscribe to my backup channels on Odyssey, BitChute, and Twitter, and click the subscribe button. New video every few days.